Let's take a look at Lab 5, where now we're going to configure up some segments. And, as we look at this, let's take a quick look at the diagram. What are we going to work with here? Well, here, notice we've gone from the external infrastructure with the student desktop and the RAS and the ESXi hosts and all those things. And we've moved into the virtual infrastructure down here. So, what we're going to ultimately create and work with in this lab is this web segment, this app segment, and this DB segment here, right? So we're going to create these segments and kind of see how that all goes. So let's take a look at how we're going to deal with that. Now, task one, preparing for the lab, just like we have, I think, gotten accustomed to at this point, we're going to make sure that NSX and the vSphere client are both open. So, here we've got our vSphere client. Let's go ahead and make sure we are logged in to our vSphere client. And again, I'm just going to copy and paste my credentials here. Copy there. Paste. Copy this. And oh, hey, look at that. A login error has occurred. Let's do this. Let's do this. Sometimes we see this. It's not a big deal. We're going to strip everything out of the title or the URL, and I'll go ahead and launch the vSphere client. My credentials should still be, my token should still be good. So we'll go ahead and get logged back in there. So sometimes that kind of stuff happens. On an existing session, we could have also just gone to our bookmark and logged in. Come back and logged in that way. Come up to vSphere and select the vSphere client, and that would have brought us right in as well. So we've got our lab prep ready to go. These are the two UIs we're going to need, and we're going to start in NSX. We're going to start in NSX because we need to create our segments. So we're going to come over here to the networking tab, and under the networking tab, under connectivity, we're going to find segments. And here under segment, we want to go ahead and make sure we're in the NSX tab, and we want to add a segment. We'll go ahead and call this web segment, and I had the B in there. I mistyped it, and that's okay. And we're going to leave the connected gateway to none. I know it's got a little asterisk here. Well, none is a valid choice here. So we're going to select none. We're going to specify prod overland TZ. And while it's certainly not required because we don't have a connected gateway, we're going to, while we're here, go ahead and set a gateway address and subnet for the web segment at this point. Now here, we're done. That's all we're going to fill out. We're going to go ahead and save. Oops. This field is required. Enter a list of VLANs because I chose the wrong transport zone. We want prod overlay TZ here, not prod VLAN TZ. So I'm glad that I jumped straight into save so that we got that error message, and I didn't have to destroy and recreate this. If we would have gotten this saved, well, there's no changing the transport zone on a segment. So we'll go ahead and save this. Right, the web segment is successfully created. Do you want to continue configuring? No, I do not. And so let's just validate. Web segment, no connected gateway in prod overlay TZ. It's an overlay network at 172.16.10.1/24. All right, we're good here now. Even with my little error there. So we'll go ahead and repeat this process. We want to create a couple of more segments here. We want to create one for my app tier. Again, no connected gateway. Let's come down and make sure I select the correct transport zone this time. And this is 172.16.20.1/24. So 172.16.10 is my web network. 172.16.20 is my app network. No, I do not wish to continue configuring, but we do want to add one more segment here. This is going to be DB segment. Right? No connected gateway. I've had some practice now. I'll go straight down to prod overlay TZ 172.20.30.1/24. There is my subnet and gateway address, and we'll go ahead and save this. And no, I do not want to continue configuring. So we see web, app, and DB that I have configured. The DB segment, I messed up on the DB segment, so let me edit this. That should be 172.16. Now the subnet, you can see the subnet I can edit, right? I cannot edit the transport zone. So that was why on the web segment it was so important for us to get the transport zone correct the first time. But here I can change the subnet fairly easily. So now we've updated that, and we'll scroll down and close editing. Look at that bonus content that's not in your lab guide. It's always a good idea to double check what you've just done, just by looking at just this summary, and that'll really get us set and going. So there we are, good shape, good shape. Now all of our segments are connected, or not connected, but configured correctly, and now we need to go put some virtual machines on those, and that's why we had to get logged into vCenter just a few minutes ago. So we're going to come in to this 3-bar menu over here, come back to inventory, because we haven't been here since we checked our licensing a few labs ago. And we're going to go ahead and expand out the vCenter server, expand out the data center construct, and then we want to expand out compute cluster, because remember, this is the cluster that we prepared for NSX. We're going to find SA Web 01. So if I select this web server, we can see that Network Adapter 1 is attached to PGSA Production. Well, that's not my web segment, so I want to attach this to my web segment. So I can right-click on SA Web 1 and come over here to Edit Settings. And we can find Network Adapter 1. I can grab this drop-down menu. Now I've got two options here, right? PGSA Production or Browse. So we're going to hit Browse, and we can see I've got my app segment and my DB segment. Now, those are my NSX segments, aren't they? Two of them. And we can tell we've got this NSX port group ID here. Let's scroll down a little bit. They seem to be sorted alphabetically, and there is my web segment. So we'll go ahead and select my web segment and click OK. I'm going to make sure that we see first web segment in the drop-down here, and connected is checked there. We'll go ahead and click OK. And we see this summary page went ahead and updated for us. Now we're going to repeat that process, right? We want to repeat that process on SA Web 02 and SA Web 03 for the web segment. We want all three of these attached to web segment. So we'll go ahead and browse here and scroll down again and find web segment. Right, so we need 3 connected here onto web segment. There we go. And we'll do that for SA Web 3 victim as well. So browse and web segment, and OK. Connected is good. All right. We also want to attach app01 and db01, SA app01 and SA db01, to their respective segments. So let's go ahead and edit SA app01, and we'll go ahead and browse for the network here and attach SA app01 to app segment. Right, so there we are at app segment. We are connected. OK. And let's go ahead and do db01. Right click, edit settings, browse on Network Adapter 1. This is db01, so let's select the db segment. So db segment, connected, and OK. So we should be good, right? We should be. We're gonna do a little bit of validation here, just to make sure. So let's go back to NSX. In NSX, we've got this network topology view up here at the top of the networking UI. So we'll go ahead and click that. and we see, we've got the details pane, and we can kind of go through this. And the lab guide will tell you to skip this, right? This just says select any node to see details, and then expand, my VMs to see what's going on there. So, we've got all of that. That only took a segment. We have 3 segments here, don't we? Web segment, app segment, and database segment. And notice as I hover over these, that tooltip that pops up here, DB segment, it's an overlay traffic. I don't have a fabric view available. I have 3 VMs attached to web segment, 1 VM attached to app segment, 1 VM attached to DB segment. Right. So if I click on one of these, if I just mouse over a segment, I get the tooltip. If I click on it, we get this web segment, we get this configuration panel here that says, oh, well, this is 172.16.10.1, and it's overlay network. And here are my different segment profiles. I can pop open a new window and look at statistics. Right? Oh, look at the statistics here, right? A whole lot of nothing. We've just attached things here. And then I could go to the configuration of this segment. Let's detour just briefly, and notice that takes me to segments, NSX, directly just to web segments, so I can look at that. So, we can come back. Let's come back here and get back on track here. We can look at this, and it just gives us a great level of detail. Now, if I click on the 3 VMs, look at that. We have our 3 virtual machines shown here: SA Web 01, SA Web 02, SA Web 03. Let's go ahead and close this configuration dialog. Now, if I expand out on app segment and DB segment, we also see the SA App 01 and SA Web 01, or SA DB 01, I'm sorry. Right? I can look at the app segment and the database segment and see all the same kinds of things we just saw when we looked at the web segment. So everything appears to be connected just fine. That's exactly what we want. Now let's see if it works. So I'm going to come back over here to vSphere because I need to get into the console of a web server. Let's use SA Web 01. And let's go ahead and launch the web console here. So we'll click the Launch Web Console. That opens up a new browser tab. And look at that. Here we are at the console of SA Web 01. All right, now we look in the lab guide. I told you, we're never going to leave you hanging trying to figure out what the credential is in task 5 of step 1 of task 5, where it says, hey, open the console. Step 1D says enter root as the username. And there we go. Root as the username. And VMware 1Bang as the password, right? The same password we use to get into vCenter. And so we've got that. Now, notice the first time I tried to type root, nothing happened. I don't know if you heard the keyboard tapping. You've got to click into this window, do it about where the SA Web 01 login is printed. That way you know you're clicking into the console and getting mouse and keyboard focus in the console. Now we're going to ping, and we want to go ahead and use a count, right? I don't want the ping to run forever. I want to go ahead and just 3 pings would tell us more than enough. We've got we're on SA Web 01. Well, can I ping SA Web 02, right? 10.12. Yes, I absolutely can. How about .13? Now, you can just hit the up arrow here, and that will recall the last run command. And I just hit the backspace to back off the 2 and enter a 3. That's our SA Web 03 victim virtual machine. We see there we are working. Everything is pretty great. That tells me that my logical switch, my segment, is working, and that's pretty great. So now we're not told to leave or close the console, but we are told to go back to mtputty. We need to get some information. Right? So we're going to show you some bits and pieces about these logical switches. Now, if you don't still have this open, remember we were in looking at this with our clusters. If you do not still have MT-PuTTY open, that's fine. Open it back up and connect back to SA NSX Manager 01. Right? And we're going to run a command called get segments. And when we get our segments, when we pull that information up, we see that we have our web segment and our app segment and our DB segment. And we have a note here that says record the UUID value for web segment in a notepad file. Well, let's use that lab notes file that we created. And I'm going to go one step further. I'm not going to stop just at web segment because it's going to save me some typing, frankly. I will just select all of these, and PuTTY will automatically copy text when you highlight it. So I'll go ahead and grab that, and we'll go ahead and just paste that information right here. Now I know what the UUID, the VNI, and the name of my segments are. That's pretty great. I have that noted should I need it. Now, we do need just the UUID. Right? So if I need any of that information later, I don't have to look it up. But here I've got this. Let me get this highlighted in the right spot. Try coming in from that side. There we go. All right. We need this UUID. We need this UUID. Because now we're going to run the get segment command. Notice how the first command was get segments. That was plural. That showed me a summary of everything. Now I'm doing a get segment. Get segment is a singular, right? And I can run this command get segment vtep, and this shows me the tunnel endpoint table for my web segment. Right, and so we can see I've got two different tunnel endpoints associated with it: 172.20.11.151 and 152.20. or 172.20.11.152. So I've got two transport nodes servicing workloads on my web segment. Now we're going to look at some other tables here. So I'm just going to hit the up arrow because we've got everything preset. How about let's look at the ARP table. Remember, we have an ARP table, and we've got 3 IP addresses on my web segment VM or web segment VNI rather, VNI 67.584 in this case. Right, each IP address corresponds to a specific MAC address, and we can see that these are on 2 different transport nodes with that transport node UUID field. So we see all of these different MAC to ARP mappings, right? What about the MAC address table? Not a MAC. Just MAC. Just MAC, that's all we need. So here we see each MAC address and which VNI is servicing it, right? Two are on transport nodes with a tunnel endpoint 172.20.11.151. That's pretty great. That's pretty great. What else can we see here? Well, how about we look at the ports table? And get segment ports gives me a whole lot of information, but how meaningful is this really? Right here as it is, I don't know about you, I don't speak UUID. However, from a troubleshooting perspective, this is immensely valuable because this gives me the logical interface to virtual interface mapping. If you remember back to what we talked about in the process flow, where NSX Manager has to map that logical interface to that virtual interface, right? The segment port ID here is my logical interface. The child UUID here is my virtual interface, and we can double check that with that child entity type field. So, this is actually a really cool piece of information. again, down the road when we're troubleshooting. We're just showing off some stuff and showing that we have amazing amounts of information in the management plane and in the control plane here that we're querying. We're actually querying the control plane. But we've got amazing amounts of information here so that when you need to troubleshoot something, the information will be available. So we've got that. Now, let's move on. Let's look at this at the data plane. Right? Let's look at this from the data plane perspective. So in this part, we're going to still use MT Putty. We're not leaving MT Putty. We want to go ahead and connect to ESXi01. Right? And again, we shouldn't have to worry about credentials here. It should all be saved. We just double click on SA ESXi01 over here under infrastructure. And, here we have that. Now, in ESXi, we don't automatically jump into the NSX CLI command line structure like we do on NSX Manager. So I actually have to enter NSX CLI by running the command NSX CLI. And you'll see the name has changed, or the prompt rather has changed here. But I can do some very similar things, right? Where did we start in NSX Manager? We ran get segments. Right here I see 3 VNIs on DVS SA data center on that distributed switch. And if I look at the local control plane entry, right, those VNIs are my web segment, my DB segment, and my app segment. There's the UUID and the name for those. So, I can also go in and look at some of the same MAC and TEP and ARP tables that we just looked at from the control plane. So, we want to think about the fact that I have a pretty similar command structure in NSX CLI, no matter what node I'm on. It's really, really great stuff. So that's building segments. Right? We saw how easy it was, and then we kind of looked at some other things that we might do to validate those segments. So that is the end of lab number 5.